Last week, I kind of went through that. I'm not going to do it again. Kind of went through the charts there and explained it again. And then I thought, well, we better look at those that are against the gap. And I could have picked anyone. I probably could have got, what's that fellow's name down in Florida? Hovine. Hovine's got a book on why the gap's wrong. And then Ham's got, well, I don't know if has he got a book out on it? Yeah. But everybody's got a little something, you know, those that are for it, those that are against it. But the reason I chose Melton is, you know, he's a Bible believer. And actually, I agree with Melton about 98% of the things that he has written. So I don't have a problem with the man. Now, I am throwing some shade back at him because he's throwing a little bit of shade on all of us with the track. So all's fair in love and war. And we can give as good as we get. But I was going through that, and I got a little distance, not too far on it. But the last thing that we talked about, he said the first problem with the gap theory is that it's based on a question, not a fact. He talked about it being without form and void, and he likened it into his wife's kitchen before she prepared a meal. And I think you should prepare it. If you're going to use that analogy, it would be liken it to your wife's kitchen after the meal, because that's when there truly is, you know, a pile of everything, and it looks without form and void. While she's cooking, there seems to be some order to it. We looked at Jeremiah chapter 4, which I think this verse alone proves the gap, because it's nearly the identical verse that you find in Genesis 1:2, and it talks about judgment, not creation. And that alone, I mean, why would God use a verse now? According to them, he's getting ready, see? He's really getting ready to do something. It's without form and void. Now he's getting ready to go in there and actually do some crafting on it, I guess. And, I mean, that's what they're saying. Well, then why is Jeremiah 4 talking about wiping out the earth, but not making a full end? Why use the same wording that's supposed to be a creative act and then talk about it in Jeremiah 4 as a destructive act? So, no, they both deal with judgment, and that's the reason why it's worded the way it's worded. Let's see here. Then he says this, I didn't get to this part. It is God's nature to work in a progressive manner. Even Adam was without form and void before God formed him into a perfect body. And I had to think about that. I said, it was dirt. He took dirt and made Adam. I don't know if I'd say are we talking about men or without form and void still laying out here or what? Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Later, he may have still felt without form and void until God provided him a wife. Yeah. No doubt, after only 2 weeks in his mother's womb, Jesus was without form and void until the gestation period had ended and he was born a healthy baby. Man, I wouldn't say that. You imagine being at an abortion rally and telling them, "You're without form and void." And what? Why would you say that? If there's anything, there's order. There's order in the womb. Just because you can't discern, arms and legs yet, doesn't mean that there's not order. Without form and void, come on now. It's not that hard. The God of the Bible works progressively. Of course, the earth was without form and void in the beginning because God had not formed it. He was just getting started. To assume that the word was actually means became is to doubt God's word. God didn't say the earth became without form and void. He said it was without form and void. And I've got down here, well, that explains it. It doesn't really. It's just parsing words. It's just, if this is all you got, then you shouldn't write a track on why I reject the gap theory. And this is a lot of what he's doing all throughout the track. Now, he go to Isaiah 45:18, so you can read along. Now, it says it's the favorite proof text used by the gap theorist. Well, I mean, it's one of the verses I've used, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite verse. I'd say Genesis 1:2 is my favorite verse for the gap. But he says there, Isaiah 45:18, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it, he created it not in vain, he formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord and there's none else. And there's what he says about the verse. The words in vain are interpreted by the gappers to mean without form and void. Well, if you kind of look at it, he says there he created it not in vain, he formed it. Wouldn't you say that the in vain would be the opposite of formed it? Which would be not unformed, or what is the word? Without form? I mean, duh. Okay. The words in vain are interpreted by the gappers to mean without form and void. Yeah. So their reasoning is God didn't create the earth without form and void, so it must have became that way. It's the words that he uses. Yeah, we think not that it became that way like it just kind of fell out of, usage or something, or fell apart. God made it fall apart. God destroyed it. And the only thing he says, and the earth was without form and void. So he says, this is only reasoning, not Bible. Like, we shouldn't be using any reasoning on this. As anyone with working eyeballs can see, and I think mine are working, the verse plainly says that God first created the earth and then he formed it. Well, I'm looking at the verse here. And it says, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it, not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. So which is it? Because you have the word formed and then made, and then you have the word created and then formed. I think it's all four, because I think he's talking about one particular act. But for him to say that, if you got eyeballs, you can see that he said that he first created the earth and then he formed it. Well, the first phrase doesn't say that. It said he formed the earth and made it. Then he said he created it not in vain, he formed it. It's almost like a continuous thought, not, how do y'all read it? Okay.
Well, you might be reading, created the heavens as earth, but it says he created the heavens.
Right.
That's before. Yeah.
Right. And every word in your Bible counts. He says he created it in Genesis 1:1 and then formed it after he created it. After he formed it, he then provided it the life forms. The whole thing is a process. None of this was done in vain because God had purpose in mind from the very beginning. I mean, you can buy that if you want. I don't think that's enough to discard the thing. In fact, it's just his reasoning of the verse. If you read the verse the way it says it, it's saying that, look, he created it not in vain. If he didn't create it in vain, it couldn't have been without form when he created it. Does that make sense? Okay. Then he says, when did Lucifer fall? A careful reading of Isaiah 14:12-15 will reveal the fact that Lucifer's fall is not yet complete. There is a prophecy of his fall, not a historical account. His actual final fall from heaven will not come until Revelation 12:7-9. Now, I had to think about this because there is a progressive, but it's about judgment, not his. Okay, would everybody agree that the fall is a spiritual thing? Adam and Eve didn't physically die the day they fell, but they fell. Are we going to say that man is not really completely fallen yet? He's in the process of falling? Or did he fall in the garden? You know why you know Lucifer fell? Because he's not Lucifer after that. Never again is he ever referred to as Lucifer. I think it's only one time in the Bible. So he's referred to the serpent, the dragon, the devil, Leviathan. I mean, he's all kinds of hideous names, but he's never called by, his original name. Why? He fell. It was a spiritual decision on his part, and it happened. Now, the fact that he's going to fall out of the third heaven into the second heaven, into the first heaven, onto the earth, into the bottomless pit, and into the lake of fire, is just showing you the progression of the judgment, not really his fall. See? And if you go to Revelation 12, verse 7 to 9, I learned a little something by reading it carefully, is that you do not have angels falling in those verses. You have angels being cast out in those verses. And I got to thinking about that because it says that now there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels were fighting against the dragon and his angels. And I'm going, or the devil and his angels. I can't remember how I was wording them going. They've already divided up sides. Before they ever engaged in a battle, they've already divided up sides. I'm starting to believe that whatever fell spiritually, besides Lucifer himself of this angelic host, like the third that it talks about being cast to the earth, I think it happened before. Well, I think it happened there. I think there's a good possibility that whatever fell, whatever heavenly host fell right there. They're just not been cast out yet. You got to remember, that's just one more step to the falling of, or to his judgment, is the devil is cast out under the earth. He literally comes down here, and his angels come down with him. So it's a little far-fetched to say that his fall is not yet complete. His judgment's not yet complete, not until he's in the lake of fire. It is true that Lucifer did sin against God and become Satan. Well, he admits that, the adversary. But the Bible never says that this came about in some massive rebellion before the time of Adam. Yeah, but it implies it. It's implying something happened. And that's where he doesn't want to look at it. He doesn't want to look at the fact that something has happened. Ezekiel 28, 13 to 15 makes it very clear that when Lucifer sinned. Now, this one's a tough one if you read it the way he's going to take it. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Now, he puts ... You can turn to Ezekiel 28, 13 to 15. Because he's not giving you the whole passage. And I believe if you read the whole passage, it talks about every precious stone was thy covering. Was that when he was in the tree talking to Eve? Because that's when he's going to tell you this happened. Now, my explanation of the verse with the gap in mind is that when God recreates the thing and he puts Adam in the exact same place as where that kingdom was. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. It says, and he's got ... Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity is found in thee. Now here's what he says. When God looks back at the history of Lucifer, he looks no further back than Eden. Lucifer sinned and fell in Eden when he tempted Eve to be his gods. But he's called the serpent before he ever even tempts. Now the serpent was more subtle. He didn't say Lucifer was more subtle and then calls him the serpent afterwards. See, something's already taken place. The fact that he's down there, what is he doing down there? Why is he there? Where is his throne? Where is his crown that the Bible talks about in Isaiah 14? You got to answer all these questions, or you just got this guy up in a tree with a crown on his head, and what's he doing?
Well, according to him, he hasn't even been cast out of heaven to the earth yet, so how could he even be on the earth?
That's true. That doesn't happen till... he shows up down here, probably as an angel of light. Now, he says, before this time, everything was very good. Genesis 1:31. Now, turn to Genesis. Okay, 1:31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And he almost got me with this one. Because he says, if Lucifer sinned in Genesis 1:2, then God lied in verse 31 by saying that everything was very good. I said, oh man, That's pretty good. So I started reading through there and looking at it and going, Well, if you start over there, look at verse 3, 1:3. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. You see that? And God divided the day from the light, or divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness called night, evening and the morning were the first day. But he said that it was good. Then in verse 7, this is the second day, and God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. It was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. He doesn't say anything about it being good or very good. Now, as we go down through here, he starts talking about, look at verse 18. This is the third day, isn't it? Or is it the fourth? That's the fourth day. Yeah, actually, verse 12. Where am I at here? Yeah. Look what he says. He saw that it was good. Verse 12, the very end of verse 12. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Then look at verse 18. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. See, he's taking each day and telling you something about it. Then he says in the next one, God saw that it was good. Verse 21. All right. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then we begin the sixth day. And the sixth day is a rather strenuous work day for the Lord. Why? Because God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after its kind, cattle and creeping thing, beast of the earth after his kind. It was so. Then he says, let us make man. He mentions there, God saw that it was good, and God said, let us make man in our image. He makes man. Okay, keep going. Because this is the sixth day. The next day is a day of rest. All the way up to verse 28, and then he talks about the fish and the fowl and everything. And God said, behold, I've given you every green herb, so on and so forth. Verse 30. Then he says in verse 31, and God saw everything that he had made, not the whole 6 days, but what he had made on the sixth day. And God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. He's not saying the whole thing was, because the second day, he didn't say there's something good about that heaven up there, because he said it's unclean. Now, Job 15:15. We call this being disingenuous. Not being genuine in looking at it with a fair interpretation, being consistent in your interpretation of the verses. 15:15, behold, he putteth no trust in his saints, yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. There's something wrong with it to begin with. There was something up there, and he didn't say anything about it being good or very good. All the other stuff he did, he said it's either good or very good. Okay. Because he really doubles down there, God lied in verse 31 by saying that everything was very good if there wasn't something good. Well, there wasn't something good. There's something about that second heaven that wasn't good. The Gappers hold that the pre-Adamic rebellion arose and was destroyed by God before the time of Adam. Yet this is contrary to God's words concerning sin and death. Sin and death were with Adam, not before Adam. Wherefore, by one man sin entered into the world. I don't know if he's got the reference there. Was it Romans 5:12? Romans 5:12 to 14, if you want to turn there. Whereas by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come. Romans 5:12 to 14. Now, the problem with this is he's trying to tell you that sin is not there until Adam. Didn't Eve sin before Adam? Okay. Didn't Lucifer sin before Eve? I'm not getting it. Now, if death Okay, you might have something there about death, but the reason when he says there that death reigned and death comes into the world, Adam is the representative. He's what we call the the federal head. That's what I was trying to remember. He is the representation of mankind. What happens to him is going to be passed down to every human being after him. And that's why he takes the onus or the blame for death coming into the world, because it's going to be passed down through him. And that's what 5:12 says. For by one man, he says, wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Now I can't think of anything that had to die, suffer a physical death before what happened in the garden. I'm giving that some thought. I think there's a possibility that some fallen angels may have perished. I don't know. That's a very loose interpretation of the verse we found in Psalms. It's not Psalms, is it? Yeah, Psalms 86, where it says, ye shall die like men. Well, if they fell, I realize when he's saying that, men are on the earth. We're talking about Genesis 6. But what about when they fell here? Okay? And this happened. Why is it that when he creates the heaven and he moves this water up and creates all this space, he doesn't say it's good? What is there? It's not good. Did he just drown them out and leave them just kind of floating around, or, they're spirits. I mean, I understand that, but I just don't know. Huh? Stink? Snake. Oh, snake in the water. I thought you said stinks. So, not sure about that. So there's definitely sin before Adam. But the verses are talking about Adam passing it down to all mankind. If there wasn't any sin before Adam, then how? Lucifer didn't sin? It says iniquity was found in him. He was perfect until then, but iniquity was found in him. Okay, the Gappers also claim that Exodus 20:11 supports their theory. Actually, I didn't know that, so now I know. For in 6 days, turn to Exodus 20:11. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Actually, I had that verse as being taught against the gap, not for it. And because it looks like the entire thing happens in 7 days, but obviously, well, in my mind, he's talking about the recreation. He's talking about after verse 2. That's what he does, the creating. But what they're saying is the word made. For in 6 days the Lord made. Their logic is that God made the earth out of existing matter in 6 days, but he didn't create it out of nothing in 6 days. Well, that's pretty much true. This is taught with the assumption that create means to create from nothing, and made means to be made from existing matter. I've never made that point. I think the words are interchangeable. He says the Bible never establishes such definitions for these words. So, and I'll agree with him there. But the verse is talking about the recreation, and it's all true. He had to remake the heaven, he had to remake the earth. So he created the heaven and the earth. If he'd have created exactly the same thing, it'd be different, but we know that he didn't. It was this. He made man a little lower than the angels. He didn't make us angels. And he made the earth with, trees and grass and everything, and there's just no indication that that kind of stuff is there. Let's see here. He makes this point. Furthermore, it should be noted that Exodus 20:11 not only states that the heaven and earth were made in 6 days, but also all that in them is. Well, if you stick to the recreation, it makes sense that all that in them is. this word, this would include Lucifer and all the angels. That's his interpretation of it. After the first day begins, he says, this would include Lucifer and all the angels after the first day begins, not before the first day begins. Not before the first day begins. We know this is true because Ezekiel 28:15 speaks of Lucifer's creation and says, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. And he's trying to say, see, it was one of them days. The Lord can tell time before and tell you what a 24-hour period of time was before he had the sun and the moon. Okay? We know that from just reading the account. In the beginning, God knows what time it is. And when he says, in the day, well, there it is. It happened in time. What day? You know, back in my day, you know how we use those terms. I don't know why I don't think the Lord doesn't use those terms like that. But do I think he created him in the day? Of course I do. Matter of fact, I think all the heavenly hosts were created right after he created the heavens. He created them, and then they watched him make the earth. That's what it looks like. That looks like the order of things. In fact, if you want Genesis 1:5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And there is no sun, moon, and stars. God knows what a 24-hour period of time is. He doesn't need the moon or the sun to be able to tell time. Okay, let me move on down through here. All right, now he's going to bring up replenish. Okay, he said God told Adam and Eve to replenish the earth in Genesis 1:28. The Gappers claim that replenish means to redo or repopulate. Not the Gappers, the dictionary, which he talks about here. It is amazing how little study a person will do when their mind is made up. I agree totally. I looked at more than one dictionary. The first definition for this word in Webster's 1828, like it is the absolute authority outside of the King James Bible. You realize that 220 years later, Webster's came along. The 1828, you know how many words can change over 200 years? That's why you have to find a dictionary that gives you the etymology of the word to show you where it came from. The 1828, this is just an example. The word witch, and I'm telling you the world will jump on you because of this. The word witch in an 1828 means a woman. Suffer not a witch to live. The warlocks or the men are fine, but don't suffer that witch to live. Put that woman to death. Drown her, stone her, hang her, cut off her head. That's okay. You see, it's just part of Paul, you know. They all hate women. But you go to the etymology of the word, which a Funk and Wagnall 1950 dictionary will explain, and you know what it says? It says it's a neuter word. You can be a man, woman, or child. There can still be a witch. So the 1828 is not the all the end all. I'm not against the 1828. I'm just telling you that, you know, to fill, the Webster's 1828 is to fill, to stock with numbers or abundance. Only in some modern dictionaries does replenish mean to redo or repopulate. I don't believe that. Do you believe that? Yeah. Come on, man. That hasn't changed for how many years? Then he says, well, now that was the pitch. Here's the throw. Why didn't God also use the word in Genesis 1:22? And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And I thought, well, there wasn't any fish or birds before, so they weren't repopulating. They were created to fill. It's amazing how the King James Bible knows which word to use. I mean, only 2 times. One of them is when Noah comes off the ark, tells them to replenish. You would agree that that would be the word, right? Okay. And then the only other time is over there and after he creates Adam and Eve and says replenish the earth. Why would, I mean, the King James translators, why would they get that one wrong when they got everything else right? And then the other 5 times it's used as the word replenished in the past tense is all correct. See, this is somebody that's trying to prove their point by just forcing something because they found a Hebrew word that means to fill. Well, I've always believed my King James Bible is better than a Hebrew text and more advanced. Okay. Okay. The gap theory holds that the beginning is Genesis 1:1, while the 6 days do not start until after the gap between verses 1 and 2. That is, Genesis 1, verse 3 to 31 aren't the beginning. Oh, come on, man. It's my beginning. It's our beginning. Is it the beginning? No. It's still in the beginning. Anyway, he says, evidently Jesus didn't subscribe to the gap theory. Adam and Eve weren't created until the 6th day, yet Jesus said they were made in the beginning, because it says in the beginning he made them male and female. But he says this statement alone shatters the gap theory. And I thought, Eve wasn't made during the 7 days. Huh? She was made after. You know, Adam's roaming around, he's naming the stuff, you know, and he says, not good that man should be alone. He made for him the woman. She's made after the fact. Does that mean that, you know, when he says, did Jesus err in saying in the beginning he made them male and female? I think we understand it's their beginning. That's the context. Mankind's beginning. Why are we're parsing words here. He says, also notice that Genesis 2:4 says that the earth and the heavens were created in a day, not before the first day began. I believe he misquoted that. Genesis 2:4. Doesn't it say the day? When they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. It's in time, so it's going to be in a day. It's going to be such and such a day, or back in their day. Anyway, I think these are poor arguments to disprove it, to be honest with you. Okay, this is the last one. We'll move on. Well, I'll be done. The careful reading, and I know this is a little bit boring and tedious, but it's best that we go through this because somebody's going to hit you with these verses. And here's what you need to do. You just need to look at them very carefully and get your context and just realize it's not saying what they're saying it's saying. It's saying something different. And that's really, it's called, you know, it's like twisting the verses a little bit to prove your point. You can't make the Bible say something that doesn't say. It'll catch you up. It's just like him saying over there that everything was very good. Well, he said that for every day, except for the second one. Because he was giving you his opinion of what he created, well, not his opinion, but he was giving you of what he did that day. And he said, what I created that day was very good. Not the whole thing. Anyway, the careful reading of 2 Peter 3:5-7 will make it clear that there have only been 2 sets of heavens and the earth, the one that was and the one that exists now. Well, that's not even true. He says this leaves no room for the gap. Now, if he's talking about different worlds or different creations, yes, there have been 2. He said this leaves no room for the gap theory because this theory demands more than 2. The gappers believe that the heaven and earth were perfect and then made without form and void due to a pre-Adamic rebellion. That's one heaven and earth. Then a second heaven and earth exists until Noah's flood. We know better than that. Since when were the heavens wiped out in Noah's flood? Since when was the earth wiped out in Noah's flood. I do believe Noah survived that thing. So he's saying that's 2. Since Noah's flood, a third heaven and earth exist. The one now. But the one now is the same one that Noah was on. Since Noah's flood, a third heaven and earth exists. 2 Peter 3:5-7 says there is only 2 and not 3. There is one heaven and earth before Noah's flood, and there is one now. So there is no room for a gap or a third heaven and earth. So he's taking the one with Noah and saying that's 1. No, that's 0. That's not 1. The heavens weren't destroyed. The earth wasn't destroyed. Okay. He says, he winds up saying this, friend, don't be fooled by the gap theory. God created the universe in 6 literal days. Now when he says that, I'm going, sun, moon, stars? Okay. Okay. He didn't need a time gap in order to get his work done. We need not compromise any of God's words in the name of science falsely so called. Okay. Now, you might find some other objections out there. I'm going to have to stop with that. Okay. One of the things I do want to state before I quit here, when we talk about the recreation where God makes the sun, moon, and stars, they're not a day over 6,000 years old. Now that right there will make a scientist just blow a gasket because he can't understand that. However you say how old the earth is, well, the heavens has to be even older, okay? Or at least the same age. And we that believe the gap, or at least I do, the earth itself, the rock, that's why I want to make a distinction. Anything that's organic, whether it be a tree, or a mud pie, whatever it is, if it's organic, it's only been here for 6,000 years. Okay? But the rock itself, the mantle and all that stuff, I don't know how old it is. And I could, if I said 2 billion, I could be lying to you. I could say 2 million, I could be lying to you. I could say 2,000, it might not be 2,000. I don't know how long it existed. I just know that it was here before God recreated the rest of it. And that there are certain things on this planet that aren't over 6,000 years. So keep that in mind too. When they start telling you they're looking at a fossil, I don't know, a fossil of a man, they try to tell you, and it is a man, and see, that's the other thing, is there's some weird things to think about. But let's say they find a fossil, they say it's older than 6,000 years. They're using a system to date that cannot be accurate. Because scientists do not take into account Noah's flood. And Noah's flood changed everything when it came to carbon-14 data. Because it's based on the accumulation of carbon-14 being a constant in the atmosphere. But the atmosphere drastically changed under Noah's flood. So their numbers could be skewed. And they may be able to get short-term numbers. They might. Maybe they can do short-term numbers. Maybe they can do a couple thousand years. Maybe they can do up to 6,000 years. But beyond that,
there had to have been a large population before Noah too, because of how long people lived.
yes.
Big, who knows, but big.
Yeah. I would think this earth would have been teeming with people. What are we talking, 1,500 years? 1,500 years, man, of people reproducing and living to be almost, under 1,000, but they're living to be 800, 900 years old. That means a lot of kids, man. Whew. You just get a couple generations. They say, well, where did Cain get his wife? Well, all he had to do was wait about 20 years and he had his pick of 5 different cousins, it didn't take long for him to start. All he had to do was just wait a generation, 20 years, 25 years, and there would have been other people born, and growing up and having kids. Probably longer than that. When you're going to live to be 900 and something years old, what's the rush? Wait 50, 75 years. So anyway, Okay, I promise next week will be different. I'm even going to skip another page of these objections. I did want to say this real quick. I'll take about 2 more minutes. I talked about, the Bible uses, let me give you the example. In Isaiah 65:17, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. Uses the plural. Isaiah 66:22, for as the new heavens and new earth which I will make. 2 Peter 3:13, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth. Okay? Always uses the plural until you get down to Revelation 21:1. And this is where I believe John says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Singular. Okay? Well, think about it this way. If you've got, even with Earth's creation here, okay, we're talking this is like a speck of dust, less than a speck of dust in the volume of outer space and all the galaxies and all that, with an atmosphere around it. That's that open firmament. Well, the Lord in Genesis 1:1, he doesn't count that. It's going to be there. Just as you don't see it counted here. Because this is an open firmament to outer space. It's still part of this heaven. Does that make sense? And I think that's the reason why it's used that way. Because Revelation 21:1 says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. It doesn't say heavens. I think it's understood that it's there, but he's talking about that universe around it. And he said, now listen to how he ends it. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. But we know that there's 2 heavens that perish, right? 2 Peter 3:12, it says the heavens being on fire. So what I'm telling you is that confused me of why one said plural, one said singular. Because I think one's taking a broader look at it and saying the heaven and the earth, and not really getting into specifics that there's a heaven around that. That's about the best I can do with it. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Was there another heaven? Well, 2 Peter 3:5, the heavens were of old, plural. So I think it's just included. I think it's understood. Now, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but it's not significant as far as the creation when you've got this vast universe. That's what I'm getting at. Does that make sense? Kinda. Anybody got a better explanation or why that would be like that? Okay. I'm going to quit while I'm behind. Next week, the fall of the angels and the pre-Adamic world. All right. Any questions or comments?